I came home to catch my wife cheating, but what happened next ruined both her affair and her boyfriend's life. Now she's blaming me for everything. I, 32, have been married to my soon-to-be ex-wife, 30, Madison, for 4 years. We are currently in counseling, but it is not going to work. About a year ago I found out she was having an affair by coming home to their clothes in our living room and sounds coming from our bedroom. I lost it. I was getting my cricket bat out of the front closet when I stopped to think about consequences. I did not want to go to jail. Instead, I took all their clothes and left quietly. I went to a friend's house, but not before throwing all the clothes in a McDonald's garbage can. I turned off my phone and got shit-faced with my buddy. His wife hosed us off in the morning. After I turned my phone back on, I had dozens of calls and texts from Madison. First scared because she got my updated flight information. Then upset that I hadn't called her to let her know I was going to be coming home early. Then freaked out that the house had been broken into. Then crazy because she figured out it was me. They just got more deranged. The guy she was with is 5 inches shorter than me and about 60 pounds lighter. So if he had taken my clothes it would be obvious. He ended up calling his friend to go get his spare keys from his house. Unfortunately for him, his wife smelled a rat and followed his friend back to my house, where she saw him leaving in oversized clothes. Long story short, she took pictures and she had evidence of his infidelity, which caused their prenup to be cancelled, which cost him a lot of money. It is all one big giant shit show. It took a couple of months, but my wife convinced me to try and forgive her. We started going to counseling and we were working our way through it. Until recently. In a counseling session she said that I was wrong to steal his wallet, phone, and car keys. She said that his divorce is costing him a lot of money and that I should have dealt with it in a more mature manner and that it was my fault. I have never admitted to taking his stuff. To begin with, I was afraid he might call the cops. Then I didn't want to give her ammunition in case she wanted a divorce. Now I just don't care. I told her that her cheating was the reason her boyfriend is getting divorced. And that I hope his ex takes everything. I am still not living at home. I have my own apartment and I'm filing for divorce. Now that I know how she feels, it is kind of a slap in the face that she is blaming me for his divorce. Update 1. Madison and I kept up counseling, but I'd be lying if I said I was actually expecting anything to change. After all, I'd found her and her friend tangled up in our bed, and she'd blamed me for his divorce fallout. But the sessions were becoming less about fixing things and more like unraveling some secret game Madison had been playing. The counselor always said we needed open communication, so I figured I'd let her do most of the talking. One session, though, Madison came in looking more anxious than usual. I thought she was going to talk about us, but she started ranting about her friend Jason. How he was panicking, how his ex-wife was basically taking him to the cleaners. At one point, she slipped, saying she was worried about him, which was the first red flag. But when she went on about how it wasn't just a fling, I felt the ground shift. Turns out, Jason was never just some casual guy she'd met by chance, he was her boss. She claimed it had started as work mentorship and turned into a mess because he had issues at home. Apparently, Jason thought he'd use Madison as his escape plan, which had come crashing down after I walked in on them. She also confessed that the reason Jason's ex had been so well prepared to take him down was because she'd already had suspicions about him and Madison from the start. His ex-wife had practically been waiting for the perfect moment to catch him in the act. Madison had no idea until she was in too deep to back out. Now that Jason's ex was weaponizing everything, Madison was terrified. She begged me to understand that she was manipulated and that she didn't know it would get so complicated. But here's where it got weird. Madison admitted that Jason had told her I was part of his plan. He figured I'd just get so fed up with everything that I'd leave quietly, without pursuing a messy divorce. If I left, it'd be easier for Madison to be with him, and he could keep his finances in check by using her to get what he wanted in his divorce. He'd actually planned for me to walk in that day. According to Madison, he even made sure she didn't hide anything when they were at our house, knowing I was on my way. It was all staged so I'd explode, and he'd look like the victim if anyone ever found out. Now, she was asking for my understanding. I sat there thinking how wild this was. They'd had it all figured out. Madison seemed to believe I'd let this go, that I'd just leave her alone to fix her mess with Jason and move on. She was practically begging me to sympathize with her because she'd lost everything. But I'd lost a lot too, and I wasn't interested in her excuses. Then came the kicker. She said she wanted to make amends and work things out for real this time. I was floored. She had the audacity to ask me to give her another chance after everything, as if I'd ever go back to someone who planned to let me walk into a trap for her lover's benefit. She was trying to convince me that she was in love with the idea of us and that Jason had just misled her. I felt like I was in a bad movie where the villain thinks they can still win you over. It was hard not to laugh, honestly. When I asked her if she felt any remorse about the plan they'd set up, she dodged the question, saying it wasn't about right or wrong. She kept saying I was part of the plan Jason set up, like she thought that would make it all okay. She said Jason wanted to control the fallout by pushing me to walk away quietly, so his ex wouldn't get more ammunition against him. They'd calculated my every reaction, and she'd willingly played her part. And now, she was claiming she wanted to make things right, as if there was any chance of that. After all that, I just looked at her and said, "You realize we're done, right?" She just stared, almost like she was shocked that I'd actually say no. She started to cry, saying she'd ruined everything for nothing. But at this point, I was drained. This wasn't my mess to clean up. I walked out, thinking that'd be the last of it. But the next day, I got a call from Jason's ex-wife. She said she wanted to thank me for all the evidence I'd unintentionally provided by walking in on them. She'd been building her case for months, waiting for the right proof to nullify their prenup. She let slip that she knew about Madison and Jason's little plan to use me, and she didn't hold back on her thoughts about it. She said she felt sorry for me, but mostly, she was thrilled her ex was finally paying for everything he'd done. Jason's ex had been tipped off by Madison's texts to him. Apparently, Madison was careless with her phone, and his ex had access to his messages for months. She was able to screenshot everything she needed, and she'd been waiting for the right time to drop it all in court. I was basically the final nail in Jason's coffin, and honestly, it felt good to know that Madison and Jason had completely backfired on each other. As for me, I decided that I was officially done. I contacted my lawyer and started moving forward with the divorce. Madison sent me a barrage of texts, pleading, saying she made a mistake and that Jason was the real villain here. But I'd had enough. I blocked her number and got all my stuff out of the house, sending my lawyer the details. If she wanted to talk, she could do it through him from now on. Now, every time I think back on that day I came home early, I realize just how calculated it all was. They wanted me to explode, to look like the bad guy, and to get out of their lives without a fight. But it's all falling apart for them now, and I get to watch from a distance as Madison and Jason's lives unravel. I guess karma has a funny way of working things out. Madison might still be out there trying to salvage her reputation, and Jason is probably regretting every step of his ridiculous plan. But for me, I'm finally free from all of it, with no regrets about walking away. Update 2. Things got a little more complicated after I cut Madison off completely. I thought we'd reached the end of it, but life wasn't about to make this easy. A week after I'd filed the divorce paperwork, I got a message from one of Madison's friends, Sarah. She said she had information I might want to know for my own safety. Now, I've got a pretty good sense of self-preservation, so I decided to hear her out. We met up, and she dropped another bomb on me. Turns out, Jason hadn't exactly taken the breakup with Madison well. According to Sarah, he'd been spiraling, showing up unannounced at Madison's place, calling her in the middle of the night, sending messages begging her to take him back. I figured Madison was probably getting exactly what she'd signed up for, but Sarah made it clear that it was more serious than just late-night texts. Jason wasn't just mad, he was out for revenge on both of us. Apparently, Jason had been trying to find out where I'd moved after I left the house. Sarah said Madison had accidentally mentioned my new address to him while they were arguing. I'm not sure if she did it on purpose to mess with me, but the fact that he knew my location was enough to make me reconsider how safe I really was. I changed my locks and started keeping an eye out for strange cars. A few nights later, I saw a car parked across the street, and when I went out to take a closer look, it sped off. Could have been nothing, but I didn't want to take any chances. In the middle of all this, Madison reached out again, this time through her lawyer, demanding a sit-down mediation. She claimed she wanted to resolve things amicably and apologize for everything that had happened. I was tempted to ignore her entirely, but my lawyer said it'd be smart to at least hear her out, so I reluctantly agreed. I showed up to the meeting ready to sit through some forced apology, but what happened instead was surreal. Madison arrived with this smug look, like she thought she'd already won. She started saying how I'd misunderstood the whole situation with Jason, that he'd been manipulating her, playing her against me, and that I was still the only one she truly trusted. She said she wanted to reconnect and that our marriage was worth fighting for. I was floored. Here she was, after everything, trying to convince me to take her back. But I wasn't falling for it. I told her straight up that she'd already done enough damage, and there was no chance I'd ever trust her again. And that's when the plot thickened. Madison's entire demeanor shifted, and she started bringing up all the evidence she had of my unreasonable behavior. She claimed that I'd emotionally abandoned her by not coming home after finding her and Jason. She even tried to twist the narrative, saying that my aggressive response had somehow driven her to stay with Jason. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own wife was trying to paint herself as the victim, acting like I'd been the one in the wrong. I looked at my lawyer, who just shook his head, silently telling me to let her dig her own grave. Then came the kicker. Madison said she had proof that I'd stolen Jason's belongings. She claimed she could use this to make things very difficult for me if I didn't agree to a more favorable settlement. I was stunned. She was actually threatening me, trying to use the fact that I'd taken their clothes and left them in a McDonald's dumpster against me. She didn't know that Jason's ex-wife already had her own pile of evidence that would make anything Madison could come up with look like a footnote. So I just laughed. I looked her dead in the eye and told her she'd better come up with something better if she wanted to scare me. Madison, clearly frustrated, tried to get back on her forgive me track, saying she never meant for things to go this far. She had the nerve to tell me she'd learned a lot and wanted a fresh start. I almost felt sorry for her, thinking she could just sweep everything under the rug and go back to normal. But that sympathy died fast when I realized that she was just shifting tactics, trying to weasel her way back in because she knew she had nothing left to hold over me. My lawyer and I wrapped up the meeting without giving her any ground. I made it clear that we were moving forward with the divorce, and there was no way I was giving her a single thing she didn't deserve. Madison left, probably realizing she'd underestimated me. I figured that would be the last time I'd have to deal with her games. But a few days later, I got a call from Jason's ex-wife. She'd gotten word of Madison's little mediation attempt and decided it was time to share a bit of her own dirt. Apparently, Jason had been keeping tabs on me for months before I even found out about the affair. She said he'd been paranoid that I'd find out and screw up his whole plan, so he'd gone to great lengths to keep everything under wraps. Jason's ex had hired a private investigator and had enough proof to make sure he'd be paying through the nose for the rest of his life. She said she was happy to share any information I needed if Madison decided to go after me legally. Jason's ex-wife also revealed that Madison had been promised some kind of cut from Jason if she played her part and left quietly. They were basically treating our marriage like a business transaction, hoping that I'd just let it go so they could move on. Jason's ex had even overheard them talking about investment plans they'd make together once my divorce was finalized. It was insane to think they'd turned my entire life into a financial strategy. By this point, I was numb. All this talk about Jason's revenge and Madison's manipulation made me realize that I'd been used as a pawn in their twisted game. They'd calculated everything, thinking I'd just roll over and let them take what they wanted. But now, they were stuck in their own trap, with Jason facing financial ruin and Madison scrambling for any bit of leverage. I've decided to stay low-key while the divorce proceeds. I'm documenting everything, making sure there's no way Madison can twist the story again. With Jason's ex-wife in my corner, I feel like I finally have the upper hand. Let them dig their graves deeper. I've got all the time in the world, and for once, I'm the one watching them burn.